Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dangerous Ideas. I'm leecamp. Good to have you here. Please make sure to hit thumbs up and follow and all that good stuff. But I'm going to get into the two major false flag events coming from both. One happening in the in a portion, a lead up to the U.S. proxy war in Ukraine. The other one happening in the lead up to the genocide that's being committed in Gaza right now. And I wanted to combine them both to show you all at once evidence of just how U.S.-backed wars around this planet happen. The evidence that shows that these things are created. The U.S. is backing right now to pretty much the two biggest wars going on right now, which is the ongoing proxy war in Ukraine and the genocide being committed against Gaza right now. And I didn't, maybe some of you knew about these. I didn't know about these two particular false flags. And I will say that one of them it's not a full false flag. So I think I'm gonna create a term right here. I'm gonna create. You better write it down because you're gonna need to use this later. This is a false flag at half mast. Okay, one of them is a false flag at half mast. The other is a full false flag. But anyway, before I get to those stories, I want to give you some updates coming from Al Jazeera and other outlets. You all know that over 18,000 people have been murdered in Gaza by Israeli forces. A large percentage, the vast majority of those being innocent civilians, many of them, at least half, being children. But to add on to those stats that you probably already knew, this is coming from Al Jazeera. Nearly 40,000 buildings, or about 1/5 of all pre-conflict structures, have been damaged or destroyed in the Gaza Strip since the war began on October 7th. A UN assessment now shows 1/5 of all buildings across Gaza. Israel has dropped enough explosive firepower to be at least 2 to 3 Hiroshima bombs, somewhere in between there, I think, although it is changing every day. So maybe they've already hit the amount needed to be 3 Hiroshima atomic bombs on a 25-mile long, 5-mile wide, tiny area. That's the amount of explosive firepower they have dropped. And now we have this new information that 40,000 buildings have been destroyed. The destruction across Gaza, as I brought to you a couple of days ago, is worse than the destruction during the firebombing of Dresden, which, of course, notoriously went down in history as utterly razing, destroying an entire city. Another update, the prime ministers, and this gets into how the many of the people that normally just fall in line with whatever the U.S. empire tells them, many of those countries, many of those leaders are getting to the point that they no longer can justify, even though these are people that have done every last goddamn thing the U.S. wants them to. Doesn't matter if it's supporting the essentially genocide against Iraq, the attacks, the endless 20-year war on Afghanistan. They've supported all these things, and yet you actually see them beginning to back away from this genocide that's ongoing in Gaza, perpetrated by the apartheid state of Israel. So this is an update that even surprised me. Where is it? The prime ministers of Canada, Australia. Let's see if I can. No, I don't have that one. But the prime ministers of Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, 3 of the biggest backers of U.S. empire behavior around the world, are calling for urgent international efforts towards a sustainable ceasefire in Gaza. A joint statement says, quote, "We are alarmed at the diminishing safe space for civilians in Gaza. The price of defeating Hamas cannot be the continuous suffering of all Palestinian civilians," they said in a statement. And again, this is a big step coming from Each of those three countries is in the Five Eyes. These are the five main surveillance countries of the U.S. empire: U.S., Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. And those three are part of that block. And for them to begin to back away from just, we support Israel no matter what, I don't give a shit, and I'm going to do a Southern accent because I can't do a New Zealand one. For them to back away is pretty crazy. I mean, it shows how insane this genocide is becoming. I mean, well, it's really been since day one, but they're seeing the writing on the wall, and this is coming from the UN Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese, who she is saying that the Israeli army is fighting everyone and everything in Gaza, which you and I may have known that. We've known that for 2 months now, that they're bombing indiscriminately. They're bombing everywhere. They're bombing hospitals. They're bombing schools. They're bombing medical clinics. They're bombing UN refugee areas. They're bombing everything they can. But it's different for UN rapporteurs to say it. It has a different level of weight, and they tend to be very hesitant on making these kind of announcements. But the UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories has voiced support for the UNGA proposal to call for a ceasefire after the U.S. vetoed a Security Council resolution. I covered that yesterday on this live stream. If you missed that episode and you want to see it, it's up on my YouTube channel and up on rumble.com/leecamp. But when the U.S. vetoed that ceasefire, they were the only ones to say no. The only ones to vote no was the U.S. in the Security Council. And they proved that the UN can no longer do the most basic job the UN has, which is stop genocides. We know that the UN can't stop violations of international law. They can't stop war crimes. They can't stop apartheid states, which Israel's been for generations. But the one thing it seemed like was their base level was like, let's stop genocides. And they have failed to even do that. That's what I covered yesterday. Anyway, she said the Israeli army is fighting everyone and everything in Gaza, including the UN. This is unacceptable and profoundly unlawful. They've killed, I think it's 100 UN workers so far. Truly just egregious, a war crime at every corner. And in case those of you missed it a few episodes ago, I went through the dictionary definition of genocide as posted on the Holocaust Memorial Fund's website, and they're getting their information from the UN. The dictionary definition of genocide, and Israel is ticking off every single box. You can go down and just say, yup, 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 yup. There is zero argument that this is not a genocide, that this is not ethnic cleansing. So not only are Canada, Australia, and New Zealand beginning to back away, but you even see Biden. Now, I know these are words. These are not actions. The actions are horrific. The Biden administration just bypassed Congress and sent thousands of more tank shells to Israel without even going through Congress, which is supposedly what Congress is supposed to do. So, yes, his actions are as genocidal as you can imagine. But it's rare that you see the U.S. administration, the presidential administration, get to a point that they're even criticizing Israel in public in any way. And Biden has said that Israel is starting to lose support because of the Gaza bombing. Biden's warned that Israel is starting to lose support from the international community because of their relentless bombing. He said, quote, they're starting to lose that support at a campaign fundraising event in Washington, as reported by Reuters. Biden also said Netanyahu needs to change his hardline government. But I know these type of statements mean nothing if you're sending tank shells and other forms of bombs and you're helping pilot the drones overhead. These statements largely mean nothing. But the only reason I would say that this does start to mean something, Biden making these types of statements, is because the U.S. so rarely gives any criticism of the apartheid state of Israel that this shows that they're feeling some pressure. they're starting to feel, because it is impacting Biden's support, whoever, I don't know who still supports Biden or Trump or any of them, but he's starting to lose support based on this genocide. And so as is the whole Democratic Party, but it really does show that they're feeling at least a little bit of pressure. That being said, again, behind closed doors, they're sending more tank shells so the genocide can continue. But anyway, there's some updates on where things are going right now, this relentless bombing. But you guys have heard me cover that, cover those details and cover these updates, live stream after live stream for many weeks now. But here are some updates, and I'll start with the in terms of false flags. Here's 2 false flags, one having to do with Israel, Gaza, one having to do with Ukraine. And the Israel Gaza one is a false flag at half mast. Okay. Which new expression I just created. But so this is from the Gray Zone, which the Gray Zone had posted, has done several good articles on the evidence, and there's a lot of it, that Israel, the IDF, did a lot of the killing on October 7th. Now, you can argue, you are welcome to argue that it is a perfectly fine military strategy for a military to go into a place where there are hostages and just murder everyone. Hostages, civilians, the hostage takers, just murder everyone. Now, you can sit here and argue and go, I think that's what they should have done. Okay, fine. You can have that debate. But that's not what people are doing. That's not what your mainstream media is doing. That's not what these governments are doing. They are pretending that everybody, at least every Israeli killed on October 7th, was killed by Hamas, which is provably false. Now, I have played for you video of some of the tank gunners firing the tank shells that said on television that they were firing into buildings with civilians. And that is why so many of the civilians ended up being burned and having the entire building destroyed. So we know that a lot of the killing that happened on October 7th was IDF. Now, I don't know if there's many people out there like this, but I just want to be clear. I am not saying Hamas didn't kill anyone. I'm not saying Hamas didn't take hostages. To me, that is evident. But to pretend that all 1,200 were just killed by Hamas is idiocy. On top of that, I've also brought to you the article showing that the Israeli government has said they're going to shred and bury the evidence, meaning cars, whole vehicles that have been burned and shot to hell are being shredded and buried, I assume in a place that no one will ever find. Why would they do that? Okay, but that aside, Gray Zone does this reporting. I'm just giving you the background to this upcoming article. Gray Zone does that reporting. Haaretz, which is they're basically a liberal outlet in Israel. They often are critical of Israel, which is why I will often bring to you some of their articles, which is very rare among Israeli press. But they are often critical of Israel. However, they are still within basically the Overton window. And so they actually called out the Gray Zone as fake news for saying that many of the festival goers, right? That's one of the things people have talked about most in this in the October 7th event, where I can't remember, I think it was 100 or 200 people. It was a lot of people that were murdered at the rave or festival or whatever music event 3 miles from Gaza. And so hundreds killed. Now, people have said, the propaganda is that Hamas just ran into this festival and started mowing everyone down that they could. Again, if there were evidence to that, then okay, there's evidence to that. But Haaretz called it fake news, that much of it was done by the IDF. And yet Haaretz has now backtracked without admitting they backtracked. They have confirmed, the Gray Zone reporting, that they dismissed as a conspiracy, showing Israel killed its own festival goers. Now, In terms of the definition of false flag, I guess people normally use it to mean something that is planned ahead of time, that you blame on, you kill your own civilians and blame them on someone else. Maybe the most famous one was when to set off World War. One of the things that set off World War II was, or it set off the invasion of Poland, was Hitler dressed up some of his Nazis as Polish soldiers, and then attacked a radio tower or something. I can't remember all the details, but and told everyone that Poland attacked him or attacked the Nazis. But so I guess it's possible that the dictionary definition would be you have to plan ahead to do this thing. But the propaganda now is the false flag at half-mast, which is saying that Hamas killed all these festival goers, when we know that is not true, at least not for all of them. And where's that information coming from? It's the Grey Zone's reporting it, but it's coming from actual police reports. And Haaretz, which reported the police reports. Israeli outlet Haaretz has acknowledged a police report confirmed partygoers at a festival 3 miles from the Gaza border were killed by the Israeli military on October 7th. In an article published November 19th, Haaretz reporter Josh Briner wrote that an official investigation into the deaths of Nova Festival attendees revealed that an IDF combat helicopter that arrived at the scene from the Ramat David base fired at the terrorists and apparently also hit some of the revelers who were there, citing a police source. And let's see, here's the actual article. According to a police source, investigation into the incident also revealed that the IDF combat helicopter hit some of the revelers. Okay, 300, I had said 200. 364 people were killed at the festival. But this also would explain, now they don't say how many the IDF killed, but this would also explain how you have such a breathtaking number of deaths. This is a grisly thing to talk about, but your average mass shooter is not able to kill more than a dozen, or in the very rare cases, a few dozen people. The worst mass shooting in American history was the Las Vegas one, and the reason that went on so long, meaning he was basically able to just keep murdering people, was because he was up in a hotel room and they couldn't find him, and so he just kept firing on people, and he killed 50 some, I think, maybe 60. And so, yes, there was more than one Hamas fighter, but even if they ran into this festival event and just started killing everyone, which we know from other evidence was not their aim. Their aim was mainly to take hostages. But let's say they ran in there and were just trying to kill everyone. They still wouldn't be able to kill 264. However, a helicopter gunner could do a massive amount of damage in a small amount of time. And it stands to reason that the IDF probably was responsible for a lot of these deaths. Let's see if I highlight it a little more. Israeli officials have sought to stifle coverage of their actions in Gaza with newly passed emergency regulations allowing police to crack down on critical reporters accused of, quote, harming national morale. In Israel, you're no longer report anything that harms national morale. So if that same shit were passed in the United States, I would not be able to do any reporting. Now, I have been heavily suppressed, had many things deleted, many platforms deleted, but I have not been arrested. Whereas it sounds like in the new Israeli policy, you could be arrested for harming national morale. The article continues. Tel Aviv's restrictions on media efforts to cover its deadly siege extend to Gaza itself, with CNN's Fareed Zakaria admitting, and Fareed Zakaria does neoliberal manufacturing of consent for war endlessly. So when these CNN and MSNBC anchors are forced to admit these things, that means it's really getting pretty bad when they're the ones admitting it. But Fareed Zakaria admitted that as a condition to enter Gaza under IDF escort outlets, have to submit all materials and footage to the Israeli military for review prior to publication. But the article continues, the suggestion that it was the Israeli military which bears responsibility for the Nova Music Festival killings, not Hamas, as both Tel Aviv and Washington have insisted for nearly 6 weeks, has largely been ignored by legacy media. As of publication, not a single mainstream outlet has acknowledged Haaretz's confirmation of the gray zone's disclosures. So, yet again, you have these revelations coming out, and the mainstream media refuses to mention them, cover them. They continue to stick with the quote unquote official and initial story that all deaths of Israelis on October 7th and the following 2 days were perpetrated by Hamas. But we know that's not true. We know it's absolutely not true. And of course, the festival, although maybe that's where the largest number of murders was, it was just a small part of it. And we know that tanks fired on buildings. We know that Israel has a directive to kill hostages, their own hostages, to kill hostage takers, obviously, and then to kill anyone who happens to be around hostages or hostage takers. It's called the Hannibal Directive, and it's luckily getting some coverage from independent outlets, but you're not going to see anything about it on the mainstream. But this is the reason I call this a false flag at half-mast is because this is useful to the Israeli efforts. As I have covered in previous the Israeli genocide efforts, as I've covered in previous live streams, there is mountains of evidence that Israel knew this was going to happen. In fact, even the New York Times, even neoliberal, pro-Israel, pro-apartheid New York Times has covered the fact that Israel knew October 7th was going to happen. They may not have known it was going to happen on October 7th, but they knew a year in advance. I've also covered other articles saying that the soldiers who are in charge of monitoring those Hamas activity near the barrier that Israel's put up, they were reporting that there was unusual activity, that something was probably likely to happen, etc. And yet nothing was done. Nothing was done. I believe it's quite evident now, intentionally, because this is useful. In a disgusting way. Now, that doesn't mean they knew every aspect or how big October 7th would be. Maybe they thought it would be much smaller. I don't know. I don't have that evidence yet. But still, they knew all of this was going to happen, and they largely allowed it to happen. All the video surveillance cameras on the Gaza fence area, where the wall area where they ultimately broke through, all of those video cameras have disappeared. All of their video footage has disappeared. The cars and other evidence are being shredded and buried in an undisclosed location. The Israeli government says they're doing that for environmental purposes, which I'll let you all decide how much you want to believe that Israel's shredding and burying cars for environmental purposes. So this is a false flag at half-mast. I don't think there's any question about that. But also, as I've said multiple times, because people like to get into the people that are trying to defend Israel right now are like to get into these debates as to whether there was rape on October 7th, or how much rape there was, or whether rape was a systematic tool that was being used, or whether it was just a couple of rapes and that was the exception. To me, that argument doesn't matter. It's disgusting and it's repulsive. And I'm not saying victims or survivors shouldn't be heard out. They absolutely should. But to me, you can have that debate another time. Right now, we're talking about a goddamn genocide that is happening. It doesn't matter what happened on October 7th, essentially, because even if you believe the entire word for word official narrative of Israel on October 7th, on what happened then, you still can't bomb hospitals. You still can't murder children. You still can't strip down hundreds of innocent civilians nude and parade them around and then take them off to torture them. Those are still war crimes, no matter what happened October 7th. And So to me, that is one of the biggest tricks in this whole debate is let's get bogged down into a debate about whether rape happened, or let's get bogged down into a debate about whether a Jewish college kid feels, alienated or feels fearful because they see a free Palestine march. And for those of you who are new to the show, I'll just mention here that I'm Jewish. I'm an anti-Zionist Jew, and being Jewish does not mean that you can shut down people trying to fight against a genocide just because it made me nervous, so therefore I can stop everyone from trying to stop a genocide. Or say that people trying to stop a genocide should be, I don't know, arrested, should be kicked out of their colleges. No, these people trying to stop a genocide should be supported. And you should be on their side, whether you're Jewish or not. All right, so now let's get to the next false flag that these revelations, also fairly recent. This one in Ukraine. But before I do that, real quick, the Rumble seems to be working, which for those of you who don't know, my main channel is rumble.com/leecamp, but it's still a little faulty. I don't know if they've been under a hacking attack or what the deal is, but so I am going to do my full live stream on all the platforms one more day. Following days, it'll be just the regular way where the whole thing is only at rumble.com/leecamp. So if you want to catch the full thing in future weeks, definitely go to rumble.com/leecamp, hit subscribe over there. But okay, let's get to this other false flag, which has new revelations in it, even though it's been years in the making. Well, okay, let me give you some background before I pull that up. Many of you know what the Maidan coup is. The Maidan coup was a U.S.-backed, at least partially U.S.-created coup in Ukraine in 2014 in order to put pro-Western, pro-United States forces in power in Ukraine that would allow a path towards NATO membership, that would allow U.S. Influence in Ukraine. Ukraine, obviously, being a former Soviet bloc country. Many people in Ukraine are Russian-speaking, Russian culturally. So it's not a clear divider of like, this is Ukraine, this is Russia. There are many people in Ukraine's, particularly the Donbass region, that consider themselves Russian, and they were being attacked. They were 15,000 of them were killed between 2014 and when the between 2014 and 2022 when the proxy war began. But what really started all of that, or pushed it into high gear, was the 2014 Maidan coup. The Maidan coup appeared to start organically, of people, chanting in the streets, large protests, etc. And then the thing that really basically pushed the Maidan coup over the edge into successfully removing the pro-Russian government and putting in the pro-Western, neoliberal, neo-con, we're going to crush Russia government. The thing that really pushed it into that next area was a massacre that killed 100 people. So with that in 2014. So with that background, I'll go to the article. This is again from the Gray Zone. Kit Clarenberg does great work. He also often writes for Mint Press. So the results of a trial that have been long time in the coming just happened in Ukraine. And it had to do with police officers involved in that massacre. So the massacre, the reason it successfully or helped the coup push the current government in 2014 out of power was because it was supposedly perpetrated by the government, right? So the pro-Russian government murders all these protesters, and then that sparked such outrage that basically they had to flee, and they fled days later, thereby making it a successful coup. So anyway, the article says 2 police officers charged with the mass shooting of opposition protesters in Kiev's Maidan Square in 2014 have been released after a Ukrainian court determined the fatal shots in the infamous massacre were fired from an opposition-controlled building. So you get that in 2014, the opposition was the pro-Western forces and the Nazi forces, which are pro-Western, right? The United States has been funding and arming Nazis in Ukraine for many years, but it kicked into high gear, obviously, in 2022. Even the New York Times has admitted that many of the Ukrainian military fighters have swastikas and things on their helmets, various other Nazi emblems on their clothing. The New York Times, when they admitted that, the way they did their propaganda was they said, sure, a lot of them are swastikas, but they don't understand it's a big deal. Literally, you can go read the article, and that's what it says. It says, yeah, a lot of them have on neo-Nazi stuff, but they don't get what a big deal it is to us in the West, which is laughable and bullshit and hilarious and everything else. But point is, you can't deny the Nazism in Ukraine. So the opposition back before the coup was the pro-Western Nazi-backed and Nazi-affiliated forces. But this court trial goes on, and Ukraine is one of the most corrupt places in the world. So you would assume that they would be able to ultimately convict whoever they wanted to, but the evidence was ultimately not enough. On October 18th, 2023, Ukraine's court determined that of the 5 officers on trial, one would be acquitted outright, while another was sentenced to time served just for alleged abuse of power, not for murdering anyone. The remaining 3, who no longer live in Ukraine, were convicted in absentia, so they weren't even there to defend themselves, on 31 counts of murder and 44 counts of attempted murder. The verdict, though, means no one will face jail time or be in any way punished for their alleged role in the infamous Maidan massacre, which saw over 100 protesters killed, triggered an avalanche of international condemnation, and led directly to the downfall of President Yanukovych, who fled the country mere days later. But here's where it gets interesting. In an apparent attempt to distort the trial's outcome, several outlets, including Reuters, simply referred to the court sentencing the officers in their headlines. So they didn't act like anything unusual had been found in these results. They just said, oh, officers were sentenced. The verdict follows years of deliberate sabotage by Ukrainian authorities who have done their best to make sure there are no real results. Now, why would the current Ukrainian authorities not want the results out? You would assume if these police, which were police aligned with, part of the government, part of the pro-Western government, if these police just murdered all these people, you would assume the current Ukrainian government would just immediately want the results out. But instead, they've been working very hard to make sure there are no results to this trial. The question of why officials in Kiev would seek to sabotage the probe has been largely ignored by legacy media outlets, but the verdict offers some highly revealing clues. Littered throughout the 1 million word document, which I feel like whenever you put that many words into a document, you're trying to make sure people don't find certain words within the document. But throughout the 1 million word document are passages demonstrating conclusively that the sniper fire emanated from buildings controlled by the opposition to Yanukovych. Collectively, these excerpts strongly suggest the Maidan massacre was a false flag carried out by nationalist elements who aimed to ensure the president's ouster and aimed to, maybe at just a more base level, kill these protesters so that it would create a firestorm in the country. Now, just reminding you, because sometimes my head gets turned around too, like the different government, what government was in power then, etc. This is opposition, meaning pro-Western, U.S.-backed, etc. Those people are firing on protesters who agree with them. Why would they fire on protesters who agree with them? Because that's what a false flag is. You kill your own people to create a firestorm. Another famous example of a false flag that didn't happen is Operation Northwoods, which is now well known. You can read about it in Wikipedia, in the liberal history of the world Wikipedia. Operation Northwoods was our own military, U.S. military, presenting to Kennedy, bringing to his desk a plan to bomb, to murder Floridians, innocent civilians in Florida. So our military killing our own citizens and then blame it on Cuba in order to allow an invasion of Cuba during when Kennedy was president. Now, Kennedy said no. He said, "What are you, out of your goddamn minds?" And he walked away. But if he had said yes, which I think most presidents would have, then we would have had our own military killing our own civilians in order to blame it on Cuba, in order to start an invasion of Cuba by the United States. That's another well-known false flag. Attempted, planned false flag. To continue from the article, the evidence was quite sufficient to conclude categorically that on the morning of February 20th, 2014, persons with weapons from which the shots were fired were in the premises of the Hotel Ukraina, the court found. Another section reveals that Hotel Ukraina was, quote, territory not controlled by law enforcement agencies at that time. Numerous video recordings show that before, during, and after the massacre, the building was overrun by the far-right opposition party, Svoboda, whose leaders used the premises to coordinate their anti-Yanukovych activities on the streets below. So this is a well-known area in that square where there was large-scale protests, the Maidan coup protests, and it's controlled. There's no law enforcement there, as part of the current government, and it's controlled by the opposition, by the right-wing nationalist, U.S.-backed, Nazi-aligned groups. That's their place. That's their home, is that hotel. And the evidence from this trial that's lasted for 8-9 years is that at least a significant portion of the firing, of the killing of these protesters came from that hotel. Furthermore, the verdict effectively ruled out any involvement of Russian security and intelligence services in the massacre, a conspiracy theory promoted heavily by pro-Maidan elements. So, this is evidence of at least some level of false flag in order to create the Maidan coup. Now, the Maidan coup in general was U.S. largely created. We were funding them. A long time ago, I brought you video of Lindsey Graham and John McCain meeting with Azov Battalion troops and others, those who were trying to create a coup in Ukraine, and telling them that we, meaning the U.S., Lindsey Graham and McCain, the U.S. would give them everything they need for it. Victoria Nuland was also a pivotal player in this. Leaked phone calls have revealed her talking about who should be put in as president following the ouster of Yanukovych. And all of this has led, it wasn't Zelensky immediately, it was several years before Zelensky got into power. But all of this led to where we ultimately ended up, which was the proxy war that the U.S. had been working to create in Ukraine for years and years. That's where we ended up. And those of us who were revealing these things to you, were revealing the U.S. backing of the Maidan coup, who were revealing false flags in the Maidan coup, all of those things, we've been called every name in the book. I mean, some of this information is the reason I've had, as most of you know, my TV show of 8 years banished around the world. If you go to the YouTube channel, even to this day, it's been almost 2 years that it's been banned around the world. That TV show, Redacted Tonight. I had my original podcast banned from Spotify. It was for bringing you information like this that we now have evidence of. I mean, we now have court proceedings showing the stuff that some of us in independent media have been saying for years. And it just goes to show I'm always right. So there's that. I'm just always right. It's pretty. If some of you were wondering how I'm always right on these things, like before the evidence comes out, it's pretty easy. Just whatever the U.S. empire says is false. And so the moment they say it, you go, oh, that's false. And then you'll be right every time. So it doesn't matter whether you have evidence yet. So like when the U.S. is like, China has a spy balloon in the sky, you just go false. And then you go and you find the evidence. And sure enough, now even the Pentagon has admitted that wasn't a spy balloon. It was a weather balloon that was off course. So you just yell false immediately. And then you wait for the truth to come out. You know, when they go, there's WMD in Iraq, you go false. And then you wait for that to be, oh, yeah, okay, I was right. When they go, Cuba has acoustic weapons that are highly advanced and are giving diplomats headaches. And you go, false. And then years later, the CIA admits that, yeah, no, there was no acoustic weapons. There was no harm being done by Cuba. It was a combination of probably a few people faking it and a few people believing that they had a headache. So, you know, I can give training courses. I'm thinking of selling, you know, like a 6-week program where I teach people how to always be right about what's going on in world news. Unfortunately, I haven't figured out how to stretch one sentence out to 6 weeks. So I'm working on that aspect of it. Like, you know, anything the U.S. says, just yell false and then wait for the truth to come out later. That's everything I would teach through the whole 6 weeks. But I just have to try and, you know, figure out a way to say that over and over for 6 weeks so I could sell you a 6-week course on how to always be right. Another thing is if something is blown up or someone is killed and it benefits the United States, but no one knows who or how or why it happened, you just yell, the U.S. did it. That's part two. So when the day the Nord Stream pipeline is blown up, you just go, the U.S. did it, even with no evidence. Just the U.S. did it. And then you'll be proven right eventually because the U.S. heavily benefited from the Nord Stream pipeline blowing up. And they also had said, including Biden, had said before it was blown up that they would find a way to stop it. Biden actually said, we will stop the Nord Stream pipeline. And the questioner, the reporter said, how are you going to do that considering it's a pipeline between Germany and France? It's not, you know, connected. It doesn't have to do with the U.S. And Biden gives a little smirk and goes, we have our ways. Basically saying we're going to blow it up. And then they blew it up. So, you know, that's how you're always right. If you always want to be right, that's how you're always right. Okay. This next segment, it is, I think, a couple of years old. But there's a reason I'm covering it now, which is, I doubt you know it. We have a secret military. We have the U.S., and I don't mean the CIA. The U.S. has a massive secret military that is part of the Pentagon that you never hear about, that is not, you wouldn't even know their real names. And I think it's important, even though this may have been revealed by extensive reporting in Newsweek a couple of years ago or a year and a half ago. But to me, it's important now because of everything we're seeing in the world and what the U.S. is doing around the world. And it's just yet another point of how little we have accountability, and Congress even has accountability over what the Pentagon, the CIA, the intelligence machine, what they're doing. So to me, this is pivotal. But before I show you that, don't we all need a moment of just seeing more amazing climate activists just destroying another important dinner by big oil? And I will never get tired of those. I will never get tired of those. So here it is. This is Climate Defiance again. I brought you a clip from them yesterday, and this is them. Took over the yacht ensconced. I guess it was at maybe it means at a harbor. I don't know what yacht ensconced means, but meal honoring Congressman Richard Neal. Slimy, slick, utterly corrupted. There's not one fossil fuel CEO whose boots this representative won't lick. Not one. And so not only does this have this congressman in present, it also has some of his, big oil lobbyists or, the big oil partnership people. And I love when they destroy these dinners. Because here's the other thing. Before I play the clip, is people pay a lot of money for these dinners. They pay a lot of money to attend to these dinners. They pay a lot of money to create these dinners, to plan these dinners, to have all the food, all the half-cooked chicken there. They pay, and all it takes is for a couple of people to present them with the reality of the destruction they are committing around the world, and their whole dinner is ruined. Even if they were to drag these people, often they don't have the security to drag these people out quickly. But even if they were to drag these people out within 5 minutes, what is everyone going to remember about that dinner? They're going to remember the 5 people who stood up on stage and said, hey, you can go eat shit, you piece of nasty, nasty diarrhea. That is all they're going to remember, is that. There's no way anyone in that room walks away from the dinner and goes, I thought the rice pilaf was excellent. They might say that, but what are they thinking in their head? They're thinking diarrhea. So, even if they were kicked out in 3 minutes, which they don't normally, even if they were, they still won. So let's all just enjoy this heartwarming moment.
Hey, get your hands off me! Don't touch me!
Protect our futures, not their profits. Protect our futures, not their profits.
You continue to take millions from corporate facts. Till you stop taking.
And let me just say that, there's obviously some cuts in this because they're not going to show the full 5 minutes or whatever. But the what probably happened there, you see the chanting there, you're saying stop protecting oil price, and then there's actually a quiet discussion between him and the guy they're harassing, the representative. I imagine that what happened is the guy probably said, if we let you speak, we'll let you speak, but then you got to leave or something like that. And so they actually let him speak. But of course, they don't have any answers for this stuff. They can't actually debate these people. They can't answer to any of this. So anyway.
Taking donations from fossil fuel companies. Okay.
I paid for the breakfast. You didn't.
That line, I paid for the breakfast, you did, as if we give a shit. Oh, you're destroying the planet. We're all going to be extinct in 30 years. Yeah. Oh, you paid for the breakfast. Oh, my bad. God, I did not realize you paid for the breakfast. Man, that really changes everything.
Keep the carbon in the soil. No new gas, no new oil. Keep the carbon in the soil.
We need you to be a leader for ordinary people, and not for corporations and big banks. Not for fossil fuel companies.
Right now! Which is ridiculous!
Where's the urgency, folks?
We're out of time!
Hey, Richie Neal, we need a Green New Deal. Hey, Richie Neal, we need a Green New Deal. Hey, Richie Neal, we need a Green New Deal.
Stop taking money from fossil fuel companies. Yes or no?
Stop taking money! Stop taking our money!
Anyway, for those of you listening to the podcast, by the way, if anyone wants to check out the podcast, it's called The Lee Camp Show on Spotify. But for those of you listening to the podcast, they have a sign up that says End Fossil Fuels, and the representative is just standing there at the podium with no response through all of this. This must have been, I'm playing a minute. This must have been 5 to 10 minutes long, which is an eternity if you're standing awkwardly at a podium. Yeah, I can tell you about it. I had a lot of good comedy shows over my 25 years as a comedian, but I had a couple where it felt like I was standing silently at a podium. But it could seem like an eternity. And that guy just sits there, not saying a word, while these people are destroying this dinner of these rich assholes who, want you to know that they paid for the dinner. I paid for the dinner. I paid for it. So yeah, let me do it. Okay, let's get into this. Secret military. Please hit subscribe, everybody. Please hit follow. That's the way I am able to keep this show going. And I don't know why there's a picture of Eminem on the side. That's just really annoying. Anyway, inside the military's secret undercover army, the largest undercover force the world has ever known is the one created by the Pentagon. Over the past decade, some 60,000. That's the private, quiet, secret military, not the CIA. That's different. This is Pentagon. And there's 60,000 is bigger than the militaries of most countries. Some 60,000 people now belong to this secret army, many working under masked identities and in low profile, all part of a broad program called signature reduction. The force, more than 10 times the size of the clandestine elements of the CIA, carries out domestic and foreign assignments both in military uniforms and under civilian cover, in real life and online, sometimes hiding in private businesses and consultancies, some of them household name companies. So just think about just that part of it, and I'm going to get to more, but just think about sometimes these people are in military uniforms and you say, well, how's that secret? Well, because they have fake identities. So they may pretend to be a far lower rank and have a different name, etc. Maybe pretend to be in a different area of the Pentagon than they actually are. So there's that aspect. Then there's ones that don't wear military uniforms and have a fake identity. So they probably pretend they are not military at all. And they run around doing God knows what. To continue, the unprecedented shift has placed an ever greater number of soldiers, civilians, and contractors working under false identities, partly as a natural result in the growth of secret special forces, but also as an intentional response to the challenges of traveling and operating in an increasingly transparent world. The explosion of Pentagon cyber warfare, moreover, has led to thousands of spies who carry out their day-to-day work in various made-up personas, the very type of nefarious operations the United States decries when Russian and Chinese spies do the same. So many of this 60,000 do most of their work online, and they have fake identities, but it's not just fake names. They have full fake identity, as it gets to the article, gets into some full fake identities from, fake social security number, fake email accounts, fake photos, everything that is fake as an online identity. And, it's tough to know everything that they're involved in, obviously. It would be quite a surprise if they were able to find out all that. A window into not just a little-known sector of the American military, but also a completely unregulated practice. Another key point here is the idea, and I know many of you will laugh at this, but the idea of the U.S. government is that you and I vote to put people into that government who then do the things that we want them to do, at least to some degree. That's the idea, right? That's the concept of representative democracy. We vote for those people. They then go do the thing. Now, I have brought to you many times about just how bought off all these people are. In fact, they just voted 412-1 for a genocide in the House of Representatives. They're bought off. But even if they weren't bought off, the secret military is not accountable to them. They don't know where these people are or what they're doing. They likely don't know where the money's going. I've brought to you endlessly about how no one knows where the money goes into the Pentagon. Much of it is going to this secret military. Do I know how much? No, I don't think anyone does. I don't even think the Pentagon does, because they clearly can't account for where most of their money goes. In their last failed audit, they said they couldn't account for 55% of their assets, which is over half of everything they're responsible for. Let's see, completely unregulated. No one knows the program's total size, and the explosion of signature reduction has never been examined for its impact on military policies and culture. Congress has never held a hearing on the subject. Congress has never even held a hearing. Not that they would get to the bottom of it. I'm sure they wouldn't do shit. But the idea they've never even once been like, what is this again? Because we're supposed to decide about what the military is doing. What is this again? Never once held a hearing on it. That's unbelievable, even for Congress. Even for our Congress, which has a approval rating slightly south of herpes, that's even impressive for them. And yet the military developing this gigantic clandestine force challenges U.S. laws, the Geneva Conventions, the Code of Military Conduct, and basic accountability. The signature reduction effort engages some 130 private companies to administer the new clandestine world. 130 companies are involved in this. And this shows the amount that corporate America is part of our secret military. Dozens of little known and secret government organizations support the program, doling out classified contracts and overseeing publicly unacknowledged operations. Altogether, the companies pull in over $900 million annually to service the clandestine force, doing everything from creating false documentation and paying the bills and taxes of individuals operating under assumed names to manufacturing disguises and other devices to thwart detection and identification, to building invisible devices to photograph and listen in on activity in the most remote corners of the Middle East and Africa. So, yes, some of it is done in other countries. Some of it's done right here in the United States. It is a massive clandestine military that our government, our Congress has never even asked to look at, never even asked to analyze. The newest and fastest growing group is the clandestine army that never leaves their keyboards. These are the cutting-edge cyber fighters and intelligence collectors who assume false personas online, employing non-attribution and misattribution techniques to hide the who and the where of their online presence. And this also speaks to, the fake Russian bot armies, which has now completely been debunked. Remember when Russian bots were all the rage? MSNBC was talking about them about every 30 seconds, saying, oh, Russian bots did this, Russian bots did that. Anytime there was a story that they didn't want you to know about, but the story was coming out anyway, they would say, oh, no, that's Russian bots. We don't know how much of those Russian bots. It has been debunked. Even the New York Times and other outlets have finally, years later, admitted that there was no at least large-scale Russian bot operation. And every time they were pointing to, look at the Russian bots, those weren't Russian bots. They might have been bots, but they weren't Russian bots. We don't know how much of those might have been this clandestine military bot army that this secret military is put together. We know none of that. It's a completely unaccountable. I mean, it's hilarious how unaccountable the U.S. government is. There's no democracy to begin with, but even if there were a democracy in this country, we are not in control of what is happening by our government. Let's see, not misattribution to hide where the online presence, even engage in campaigns to influence and manipulate social media. Hundreds work in and for the NSA. But over the past 5 years, every military intelligence and special operations unit has developed some kind of web operations cell that both collects intelligence and tends to the operational security of its very activities. This protective effort entails everything from scrubbing the internet of telltale signs of true identities to planting false information to protect missions and people. And I'll just insert here that one of the, now this had to do with the CIA, but it had to do with that same effort they're talking about, which is, scrubbing the internet, scrubbing true identities, false flag hacks, which is when they would hack a country, but pretend it was another country that did the hack rather than the United States. They have those kind of tools, and WikiLeaks was the one that revealed that the CIA had those kind of tools. It was called CIA Vault 7 that they revealed many of the tools that the CIA has. One of the ones that I remember from CIA Vault 7 was that they, and this isn't shocking, but they had the ability to go into a system, hack it, and then rather than leaving their own footprints where people would go, oh, I think this was an American hacker, a U.S. hacker, they would leave Russian footprints. They had a program that would leave Russian footprints, like a couple of Russian characters somewhere or various other things, maybe a location, some sort of GPS. I don't know. But that was one of the tools that CIA Vault 7 had. And that's really pivotal because during the completely debunked Russiagate, we saw many, on MSNBC and the Democrats, et cetera, saying, oh, we've proven that it was Russia that hacked the DNC because we saw Russian letters in the hacking. If the FBI looked at looked at inside and figured out it was Russian footprints, and you go, well, we know that our CIA and others have tools to pretend it was Russians when it wasn't. But besides that, it also there were mountains of evidence showing that it wasn't a hack; it was a leak. Someone within the DNC leaked the Clinton emails, etc. But okay, moving on. Signature reduction industry also works to figure out ways of spoofing and defeating everything from fingerprinting and facial recognition at border crossings. So this is not just online hacking. It's sneaking into countries and somehow succeeding at defeating the facial recognition systems. To ensuring the undercover operatives can enter and operate in the United States, manipulating official records to ensure that false identities match up. An impressive amount of people, effort, I'm sure money goes into this false military, or false might not be the best word, but secretive military that the U.S. has that has never been analyzed or regulated by Congress, by the people we actually vote for. I mean, incredible. And this is a Newsweek article. So it's not like the mainstream media doesn't know this exists or Congress doesn't know this exists. They've probably read this article and yet they let it go on. You see, it's all a game, folks. It's all the Matrix. Okay, I'm actually going to continue to talk about this article and others for members over on Locals. Give them an extra segment over there. So if you're on Locals, this will all continue. If you're on the other platforms, this will end. But if you want to become a member of my community, it's 38 cents an episode. I hope it wouldn't break your bank. So you can find that at leecamp.net. You just type in leecamp.net. It'll forward you to Locals. But also at rumble.com/leecamp, if you click the red Join Lee button, that will take you to Locals. You get extra segments. You get my ebook, Dangerous Ideas. You get all kinds of extra segments. You get a Q&A, which I often do in my Local segment. And yeah, join me over there for more on this topic. I have not covered everything about it. So join me at leecamp.net for more coverage of this, as well as a Q&A. And if you're not making the jump, then I will see you. I don't have a live stream tomorrow. I'm always off on Wednesdays, but I will see you again Thursday and Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, 4 days a week. Join me all 4 days a week, or you will not understand the plot. None of it will make sense. You'll be like, why did that guy die? Why is she marrying him? I don't know. Oh my God, she got an abortion. Like, you won't understand the plot unless you join me all 4 days. Okay? So definitely do that. All right, Locals, I am coming your way in 1 second. Just give me 1 second. And everyone else, keep fighting. Please don't go away, Locals.